All right, what's up? Welcome back, everybody. It's Benny's dad here on the Chart With Me series. Been a couple of weeks since I made a video. I was actually out of the country traveling, and then I came back, kind of watching the markets, wanted to see kind of what I missed, get caught up before making another video. But I figured today's Sunday, June 9th, coming into the week, we got a pretty heavy week in terms of like data, events going on, earnings, things of that nature. So I wanted to go through all that, and then my normal like kind of just chart with me type of stuff that I do. So without further ado, let me share my screen and we'll kind of get into what I'm seeing in the markets. So I always like to start and look at the calendar for the week to see kind of what's upcoming. Monday and Tuesday are going to be pretty flat days in terms of just like economic reports. Now you do have Apple's like WWDC conference, and based on that, we might see some volatility in some tech names. Specifically, if Apple ends up announcing some type of AI partnership with what they're doing with OpenAI, or updates to Siri, anything like that. Like the WWDC is very software driven, so we'll kind of been expecting some type of AI announcement from Apple. Could be a buy a rumor, sell the news type event, but that begins on Monday, and there might be a bigger presentation on Tuesday if I'm not mistaken. But I know at the very least it starts on Monday, so maybe some volatility in tech based on that. And then we also have CPI and FOMC speech on the same day on Wednesday. CPI is going to introduce a little bit of volatility as people kind of speculate what the Fed is going to do. That's at 5:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then obviously at 11 a.m. is when the initial report comes out. And then at 11:30, Fed Chair Jerome Powell starts speaking. So when that happens, we could probably expect even more volatility depending on what he says and the decision by the Fed. Everybody's pretty much saying no rate cuts all year. So if they come out, kind of keep that. But maybe with a more dovish tone, we could see obviously the market come up if the CPI prints hotter than expected, and then they come out hawkish. We could see volatility to the downside as the market kind of reacts to maybe a no interest rate cut environment for into 2025. I said, Jesus Christ, rusty after 2 weeks. From an earnings perspective, pretty light week, right? We're kind of done with earnings seasons. We do have some bigger players in the tech space with Oracle, Broadcom, Adobe coming out, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I don't think those are going to have like huge effects on the market, but I do know like AVGO is a pretty popular, options play for a lot of people that like to do that. Adobe is interesting to me because they're like creatives and freaking like graphics, all that stuff coupled with AI, like that's going to be a huge showing depending on what their earnings are. And then Oracle, of course, is just a huge company. So always want to pay attention to what they're doing in terms of software, earnings, things of that nature. They're kind of like almost at an all-time high or near all-time high. So definitely keeping those three on watch. Like I said in my last episode, I don't really like to play earnings. Like it's too much of a gamble and it's uncontrollable in terms of like managing risk in terms of like options. Because obviously they happen outside of market hours, so you can't really transact options. You can make a huge gain and lose it before the market opens. You can make a huge loss and have it come back before the market. But you're basically whatever you put in, you just have to be willing to lose if you play those. But at the same time, I'll be interested to listen to the call after to kind of get an idea of the landscape of tech. And I suggest you guys do all that as well on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday after the earnings come out. Insider Monkey is a great resource for that. So close this real quick. Since Apple has its WWDC event, figured I'd go over them first. So last time we spoke was on May 21st. You can zoom in here, right? We were right here pushing up this highs. Talking about how bullish I was, maybe expecting a retest of 190 before we go. Well, we definitely got that retest and some came down, but really just respected this 91 level. I mean, this 186 level of this 61 retracement level from a previous fib that we redrew, and then kind of just been on a steady uptrend since then. A couple of factors in here. For me, I think that you get a little end of the month bullishness, right? Started like the last 4 and first 4 days of the trading month are typically the most bullish. So when I see that, that makes sense. And then you couple it with people just getting excited for the WWDC event. People are starting to pile in and in an expectation that Google is going to announce something crazy and go from there. So we kind of established this new trend line that I drew, I believe, on an hourly time frame. And we've kind of just been respecting it for the last, week or so, right? Since we had a huge spike in pre-market, but gave it right back up, and then kind of traded sideways for a bit, cracked this 78 level, 1, 2, 3, and then on the fourth time, cracked it, retested, and then went. But overall, still kind of respecting this trend line. So I actually, on Friday, I entered some Apple calls right here. I entered June 14th, 195 call. In that kind of same, buy the rumor, sell the news. And then Friday, we just had an absolute gift of a day, just straight up to the upside. I said on my previous episode, I'm still expecting Apple to get to 200 before Independence Day. So we have a little bit, over about 3 weeks, 20 days to get there. I think that this conference is going to be a huge boost if they come out and announce something great. Like, everything still looks pretty bullish here. We did never come fill in this gap, but that's okay. Sometimes gaps don't get filled, but we are kind of the third time testing this. 1, 2, 3 times testing this like 200 area, and really 4, right? And so if we look at this hourly and go back to this area right here, this is just one example. So I'm not trying to use this as like, hey, Apple loves to do this all the time. But we can see, it had 1 test, 2 tests, 3, 4, 5 tests before it finally broke through and went. And hopefully we don't have the same thing happening here with a kind of like a 1 test, 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests, 4 if you want to call this a test, and then now we're on the 5th test. Maybe we go. I think most people would just say this is approaching like a 3rd test. If you look at these highest highs of these peaks, or if you look at maybe like a weekly chart, you'll see, it's really kind of like a 3rd test of this high. Forget where I read this, but like people like to look at this W shape as kind of like the end all be all of things going higher. So we'll see if that actually holds up. And Apple does push 200 and break through that and go to the upside. All right, so moving on here, we're gonna go. Let's go check out Google. Google was approaching all-time highs. It had made all-time highs, and now it's kind of just trading sideways. We're looking at the weekly chart here, right? We're going back to the last time we spoke. It had made an all-time high. Since then, has retraced and kind of had these 2 doji weeks where we're not really going anywhere. Now, the last time that happened, we can see at the end of April, we had a huge boost after that. So, TBD if that happens again. If we look at the daily, we can see more of the same here. We're kind of forming a little bit of like a head and shoulders, right? If this is one shoulder, this is the head, this is another shoulder, right? So we could come back down. I hope we don't come back down this far, 165. But I think this blue line is a nice little retest at 170. We come back here and go. Now, if Apple has news that drags all of tech up, then Google won't come back down that far to test. If it is a sell the news event and it affects Apple, affects Google and Microsoft and everything else, then it will likely come back down and test this 170 and go. This looks pretty bearish to me, right? This huge bearish engulfing candle, pretty high volume. Like, I would have been more convinced if the volume was more close to the average. But just be on the lookout for Google to take a dip here. Again, I said this before, I really don't like downside plays. If you like downside plays, maybe you maybe you take a Google put into next week. I just think with all the news, data, events, everything like that, we're at a hold situation at best, or a short buy. Lilly continues to make all-time highs, just absolutely monkey punching the field. But this kind of goes to show what I was talking about before, where we trade sideways for an extended period of time. This time it was nearly 4 months. Like, your options plays are just getting eaten up in this zone. But if you were lucky enough to call it right here and go, you're seeing a lot of those profits come in, as we've nearly moved $100 in 2 weeks time. From this was May 14th. Now we're June 10th. We were at 750 to 850, right? Like, that is a huge, ginormous move that probably doesn't get spoken about enough, because we're dealing with NVIDIA and them taking just the majority of the market for a ride. But like, Lilly is quietly just continuing to push up and up and up, and having a crazy year, not giving a ton of like trading opportunities to get in, unless you're just like, hey, fuck it, I'm just gonna ride the high and go bullish. Not a ton of like pullbacks to get in. If it does make these minor pullbacks, you got to get in when you can. Lilly, pull an NVIDIA and split, please, but you're probably gonna piss off a lot of people. All right, moving on. We're looking at Microsoft's chart. A little bit similar to Google, not so much head and shoulders though. One might call this a cup and handle, right? If you can picture this here, maybe it's easier to picture on the weekly. A little cup and handle action, where we're seeing, high, dip down, revisit the high, and then come back down about halfway. These fib levels look nice as well. I know this looks pretty convoluted on here. But Microsoft continues to be very strong, and it could be headed back to all-time highs as well. I do like this, like, would have liked to get in on this dip, right? Last time we spoke, we were here. I was like, hey, it's continuing to push higher, and then gives a huge opportunity to get in, dipping back down to 400 essentially before going. So this is one of those things where, unfortunately, I was out of the country and I missed it. I couldn't account for this happening the last week of the month. But Microsoft gave people an opportunity to kind of reload before it cruised back up another 5% over the past week. So be on the lookout for those dip opportunities. It's always nice. They're few and far between. But hey, when you miss them, you kind of just gotta, you could enter here on this red candle and get in late. But again, with all the volatility expected in the next week, I'm kind of holding off. I'm just holding off on a bunch of stuff. Like I said, I have the Apple play. So I'm just cruising. I'm just going through my little set list here. NVIDIA, right? We've talked about how much of a monster this has been over the course of the last year. It finally went through the stock split on Friday. And so now obviously it's trading at $125 as opposed to $1,250. And there's kind of two ways I can see this playing out. I can see a lot of investors that are in the retail space who have been waiting for an opportunity to enter NVIDIA and could not afford $1,200 a share, though those are less and less because of platforms like Robinhood and Fidelity that offer fractional shares. Many of them don't. Like Vanguard doesn't offer fractional shares. So anybody that's been on the sidelines for NVIDIA this whole time might see an opportunity to enter, and that could drive the price up. But if you look at how Google played out, Amazon played out, Apple played out, all very hot stocks at the time of them splitting, they took like between a year and 2 years to rebound to all-time highs and make new all-time highs post-split, right? And the reason I believe that that's probably more likely for NVIDIA is because, first of all, we've just been on a hell of a run all year. I think up like 80%, up a ridiculous percentage, right? So you have a lot of people that have an opportunity to exit a smaller portion of their position than before. Like, so say for an example, you're a retail investor, you have 10 shares pre-split. If you were to sell any one share, you're giving up 10% of your position to free up, $1,000 in capital. But now you can sell 5 shares, keep 95% of your position, and free up, whatever, $600. Now, these are very small numbers for examples purposes, but if you extrapolate that out to, potentially hundreds, if not thousands of people doing all of that at the same thing, just saying, hey, you know what? Like, we're a hedge fund. We've made X this year. Let's sell some of our position, give some of that money back to our investors, locate a new play, look for like tech's run pretty hot. Like tech is up like 30% since October. Like, let's go ahead and take our gains as we ride into the back half of this election year. We go into the summer slowness. Like, let's just take some money, put it on the side, and wait for either a presidential candidate to like surface and really like, we know the direction of the country post election. Like, all that is in play, and it's even more in play now that they have, potentially 10 singles instead of a $10 bill, right? Like, and that's a great example. Like, if I go to a flea market and I have a $100 bill, I might be less likely to buy something. I'm like, do they have change? Like, is this really worth it? I really like this $100 bill. Whereas if I go to the market and I have 100 singles, right, I might be like, all right, cool. I could spend $2 here. I could spend $3 here, and I still got a majority of my quote unquote wad. NVIDIA investors might be looking to do the same thing, just sell off a smaller portion, let a vast majority of their position ride, and they have more options. So hopefully, like, we could get a pullback. If we fill this gap right here, this would be insane. Let me blow this up so you can see it a little better. But there's that gap that happened right after earnings, which was to the upside. Like I said, if you played Taiwan Semiconductor, good for you. But this gap right here, if we come back down to 95, this would be like where I'm looking to kind of enter. Honestly, like 100 would be great. I'd also take this little gap right here being filled. So 106, right? I'd buy some here, buy some at the top of the gap, and then hopefully we gap all the way down to 95. Like, NVIDIA is still going to be a major player, like, as they roll out more products every single year. Like, Jensen Huang is doing a really great thing, like, with his company and with the leadership. Chips are going to be hot. Like, the idea is the AI is just in the fledgling stages, yada, yada, yada. Everybody knows the AI story, right? That being said, I would not be surprised as we move into the third quarter of the year, and honestly the back half of this quarter, we see a little pullback in NVIDIA. Like, I'm not bearish. I'm not saying buy puts. I'm not saying sell your whole position. Like, I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that post split, I think it is more likely of an event that we see some type of pullback, and whether that's all the way to 100 or 90 or 80, yet to be seen. But I do think we get a sell-off kind of next week, and hopefully that doesn't drag the whole market down. But it could, if it's coupled with, a sell-off on Apple because their announcement isn't that great. CPI comes in hot. Fed Jerome Powell is hawkish, right? Like, all these things add up. Like, we're going to get a pullback in the market. So that's a lesson in like adding fundamental analysis to your technical analysis to look at the overall picture of the market to kind of like formulate your hypothesis in theory. Now, on the other side, maybe there isn't a sell-off. Retail investors come in, NVIDIA's at a cheaper price. They start to pile into NVIDIA because now they have their opportunity. Apple makes a sick AI announcement. CPI comes in cooler than expected. And then Fed Jerome Powell is, dovish, right? That's the other side of it, where we could see all-time highs across the board in tech, and as we move into SPY as well, right? So like, both scenarios exist. I think 60% we get the bearish scenario just based on like, we've been running since October, right? We had a little bit of pullback in April, but at the same time, like, I don't want to assign less than 40% to the bullish case, because as a optimist, I'd love to see things go to the upside. We had our pullback in April, like, we're good to go. So we'll see, right? You can look at seasonality during a presidential election year, blah, 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 and pull all this other stuff. I'm just looking at the charts, looking at tech, and looking at, exactly what I expect. So I'm just one man with a few dollars in the market. moving on here. Palantir has been a thorn in my side, but I think we're gonna start moving to the upside now. So like one thing that is kind of the case for like that upper gap close on Nvidia is what we saw here in Palantir, right? So Palantir loves to make these little head and shoulders, right? Here's one. Here's a head. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this better. Sorry about that. 1 second. So, all right. So here's one little head and shoulders. Here's shoulder. Here's the head. Here's the other shoulder. And we come all the way back down, basically beyond the neckline. Here, we don't fill the gap entirely, but we do a pretty good job. And then head back up, right? Now we make it another one. We got a shoulder right here. We got a head right here. We got a shoulder right here, right? Fill to the neckline. We could pull back all the way down here, but given the other strength and tech names and chips and all that good stuff, like these guys do AI boot camps. Here we go, right? We could be forming another shoulder here, or we could be headed for all-time highs, right? I do like the defense of this 20 line, right? That's a good, strong number, 20. I think we won't get a test till 25, which, as you can see, 25 has been very challenging for Palantir to break. Kind of in this no man's land, trading sideways for a bit, and then to the upside. If you wanted to play this little flag right here, that seems to be forming on the daily, good on you. I would set a price target for 25. I'm kind of staying away. I do have shares in the company. So I do expect, over the long run that this goes to be like a $30, $40 stock. But for now, the way it's trading to the side, I'd be hesitant to play this little bull flag pending, the week that we have coming up. Love to get through this week to the other side of the week and just have a nice clean back half of June to go off. We talked about SMH, the chip sector. It goes hand in hand with the last two stocks that we just talked about. But this box never came. This trend line test never came, right? This is where I was saying, hey, we could get a pullback if NVIDIA's earnings are bad. NVIDIA's earnings were not bad, right? So that we crushed all-time highs. I remember in a couple of videos ago, I said that 250 was a nice price target. Look at that. Boom, kissed it, came back down. And now we're trading at 255, 260. Just been an absolute great run. We got a new trend line established here. So maybe we'll see this kind of get tested more. Come back down, boom, test 245 and then go. Since we seem to be stalled out at this like 250 if we go higher. Couple of last names here. Tesla continues to just trade sideways. Look at this. Look at this tight consolidation right here, right? Super, super tight consolidation. Range bound. If you're a big fan of trading ranges, this is all you. Could have had a nice, strong breakout and test here. We did not. And just been trading really in a tight range. Tight. Usually when this happens, you'll see an explosive move one way or the other. You could call this a triangle. You could call this whatever you want. Consolidation, accumulation, whatever the case may be. I cannot, and no one can, predict a move, an explosive move either way in an environment like this. This is an absolute nightmare. Trading sideways, just eating options up scenario. I'd like, as an investor, for an explosive move to the upside. Can't predict the weather, right? Plan a pretty picnic, can't predict the weather. So honestly, but I do know I'm looking for levels. If it breaks 165 to the downside, we're going to go, right? If it breaks 180 to the upside, I think we're going to go. We have a lot of room either way. If it breaks 180, then I'd be looking at 185 till 195 and eventually 200 as some levels. If we break 170, that's where I'd be looking at that 165 all the way even down to back to 150. As we never did kind of close this gap, we closed this gap up here. Maybe that was enough to kind of go to the upside. Last one here on the list, as usual, just want to talk about pet favorite Uber. So I had spoken on the 21st about watching a break of 60 to get down to 58 to load. If it held 60, that's where I'm looking for like a more short-term kind of situation. And that's pretty much exactly what we got, right? We had talked right here. We, at the very bottom of this, didn't even break 62 to the downside, just really held that level, traded sideways for a bit, and then boom, we are back up making not new highs, but making really solid progress on getting back up to, well into positive territory for the year, as opposed to just being a slight gain. So, if Uber needed a target, I'd say this like 74 level was pretty nice, right? This previous support that turned into resistance. So if we do go, we also have this little gap right here that needs to be filled. I mean, it was filled already, but we'd love to fill it again to the upside. If we want to fill this little gap, right, this gap down from earnings that broke my heart, we've pretty much gotten there. We could see 70 being like a nice big psych level. But honestly, guys, like everything is looking pretty bullish if you look at the daily candles for most things. We also have a couple of tech names being added to the S&P 500 and CrowdStrike and GoDaddy. So tech might continue its run. It's been on a phenomenal run all year. As we kind of look at XLK, right? Like see how far we've come in essentially a year. And we could get a pullback in tech in general. We could get a pullback across the market in general, right? Like the themes and events of the week, starting from Monday to Wednesday, are really going to set the tone, I believe, for the rest of the summer. Like, are we going to have a really bullish summer, like follow the election year mantra, or are we just going to kind of, go sideways or have a bearish summer as we kind of go into the uncertainty of the election year? TBD, right? It's to be determined. The only thing that can really predict that is somebody with a better crystal ball than I. I can just play the charts, look at some levels that I'm looking at, and play what's in front of me. So I'll be back in a few days, probably on Thursday, once we get through all the craziness, kind of give my outlook for what I'm expecting on Friday and into next week. But play it safe. Honestly, just manage your risk well. We didn't talk too much about specifics on strategy, but hopefully some of that outlook on the overall market is going to help you. Thanks for watching. Make sure my dogs leave a comment and like, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. We'll be back in a few days. Until then, stay safe and good luck with whatever your strategy is.